You are listening to a free version of Majority Report by Sam Steeder. To support the show and get another 15 minutes of daily program, go to majority.fm, please.
The Majority Report with Sam Steeder.
It is Monday, August 29th, 2016. My name is Michael Brooks on a Michael Monday, and this is the four-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On today's program, Rafia Zakaria, Pakistani author, journalist, commentator, discussing whether or not feminism, war reporting can be a feminist project. We'll get into that. We'll talk about the colonial dimensions of gender, war reporting, and a lot more. Also, is spring in the air in Zimbabwe? ZANU-PF contemplates state of emergency as protests erupt across Harare, protesting the decades-long rule of Robert Mugabe and ZANU-PF. Dilma Rousseff vigorously defends herself, facing impeachment, vigorously defends herself in the Brazilian Senate, talks about getting elected democratically, her record fighting poverty. Hillary Clinton drew the connection between Donald Trump and this alt-right thing. She also may have given a great boost to Alex Jones's career, unfortunately. Sleazy pharma company jacking up prices. But is it a feature or a bug of capitalism? The Colombian government and the FARC rebels have signed a ceasefire, ending a decades-long brutal guerrilla war in that country. That ceasefire has formally gone into effect. And Donald Trump, I don't even know how to process this one, and that's saying a lot for me and Donald Trump. But there was a horrible murder of a famous basketball player's cousin. And what was his first reaction? She got killed in front of her kid. Black people are going to vote for me. It's true. It's really true. Even I am ready for this election to be over. It's true. It's really true. And we will hear from Maine Governor Paul LePage, who is at least a self-made Donald Trump, but a prototype. He left a good voicemail for state legislator in Maine where he explained how he felt about being called a racist. And he wanted the guy to prove it, and then went on to go prove it himself. And talked San Francisco's 49 player Colin Kaepernick on why he's sitting out during the national anthem.
Kaepernick,
excuse me. Kaepernick. Ugh. Kaepernick. And showing that he's on top of his brief. He's a smart dude. As radicalism potentially returns to professional sports. We're back from vacation, and I want to check in with everybody. But first, I want to let everybody know about one of today's sponsors. I spent a lot of this vacation. I basically like to go swimming and hiking, see family, see some old friends, and just read. I like to actually catch up on my reading, and I love this sponsor we have today, Texture. So, look, Texture has completely reimagined magazines. It gives you the articles and stories you really want all in one place, plus interactive features, videos, and recommendations just for you. So, yeah, it's curated, and they can find your unique patterns. Maybe you're like Sam, where he reads The New Yorker and Handyman magazine. That's an interesting reading set. If you're like me, you can read Esquire, magazines about sports and tennis, and also The New Yorker. Rolling Stone. Texture app lets you tap in the world's most popular magazines anytime, anywhere, using your smartphone or tablet. Breeze through hundreds of your favorite magazines, including back issues, and pick the articles that interest you most. Texture has made it easy to find the articles you care about. You don't just have to read the full magazine, the full title. The Texture editorial team recommends content for you every day. Plus, I can dive deeper with personalized collections. So that's my sort of own Michael Brooks magazine at my fingertips, or Sam Cedar magazine, or Kelly Carey magazine, or Matt Leck magazine. Matt actually reads, and then he dictates the article to himself, and then he listens to it at a sped up speed. It's interesting. The best part of text, and if you sign up for Texture right now, you get insider access to all of the contents from the world's best publications. And I'm not kidding. I mean, let me just give you some of the examples here. You got Ad Week. That's relevant for two dope boys. You have Canadian Health and Lifestyle. That's specific and actually kind of awesome if you're interested in that. You have Dwell, which is an amazing, building and architecture and design magazine. As I said, Rolling Stone, Mother Jones. You have PC World, Men's Health. I mean, Motor Trend, Motorcyclist, the Smithsonian, the National Geographic, New York Magazine.
I subscribed to Motor Trend in high school.
You subscribed to Motor Trend in high school?
Rewatch it.
And yeah.
Read it, I guess.
Listen to it. And Macworld, Maclean's. I mean, just an overabundance of great resources here. And the best part is Texture is offering Majority Report listeners a free trial right now when you go to texture.com/majority. You'll gain entry to all of the top magazines, including back issues and bonus video content. Start binge reading for free right now when you go to texture.com/majority. Link is on our website. We have one more sponsor to get to, but really quickly, how was everybody's break?
Mine was good. I actually watched a movie, which I haven't done in months. I watched Inside Llewyn Davis. It was enjoyable. It's maybe not the most amazing or notable Coen Brothers movie, but it's a solid Coen Brothers movie.
Matt Leck consumed a solid Coen Brothers movie on his vacation. Kelly Carey, what did you do?
I went to the beach. I had an
Nice.
extended vacation, and
Did you take your dog to the beach?
No, it wasn't allowed.
Oh, no.
I know, it was such a
That's
bummer.
garbage.
But I boarded her for the first time, and she seemed to really like it. At least they said so. And
They have a little bit of a self-interest to say that.
well, yeah, but she seemed happy.
She seemed happy.
She
Okay.
likes being around other dogs. And then I stuck around Brooklyn for the second week, and I consumed The Night Of, the HBO series. And even though it's a remake and I kind of knew what was going to happen, it was a little different. It was good. So, yeah.
Yeah, I got to get on Night Of.
I liked it.
My friend Waz was texting me about that the other day.
It's long. I mean, it's only 8 parts long, but it's a commitment if you don't watch a lot of TV.
It is so weird having that monitor there. It's like I see like your hand gestures.
I can see you. That's
It's so funny. And you can
the
see me on the
funny part.
camera. It's so funny.
Yeah.
All right, let me get to this other sponsor before we get to Rafia. Not all ingredients are created equal. Fresh, high-quality ingredients taste better, and they're better for you, so it's important to know where your food comes from. That's why I love Blue Apron. I've had the opportunity to cook with Blue Apron, had meals that are like, hearty, kind of American-style meals, meals that are more like kind of more Asian style, which I tend to really like a lot. It tastes incredible. They're very, very easy to make. And it's actually fun. It's a fun activity to do with someone else. Blue Apron has established over 100 partnerships with over 150 local farms, fisheries, and ranchers across the United States. As a result, seafood is sourced sustainably under its standards developed in partnership with the Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch. Beef is raised humanely, regenerative farming practices are used for produce, and Blue Apron can be delivered to 99% of the continental U.S. and 99.5% of all food deserts. And because Blue Apron ships the exact amount of each ingredient required for a recipe, they are reducing food waste. Cooking together builds strong bonds. Research shows that Blue Apron families cook nearly 3 times more often. And those who spend a lot to eat out at high-end grocery chains can now spend under $10 per person on a delicious meal. That's an incredible price point if you're in that realm of eating a little bit more why you have better tasting meals, really. Blue Apron knows that when you cook with incredible ingredients, you make incredible meals. So they set the highest quality standards for the community of artisanal suppliers, family-run farms, fisheries, and ranchers. Blue Apron delivers seasonal recipes along with pre-portioned ingredients to make delicious home-cooked meals. Whether it's Japanese ramen noodles with wild-caught salmon or heirloom tomatoes, Blue Apron is bringing you the best. Here's some of the meals available on this. Spiced pork burgers with goat cheese and cucumber corn salad. That is so good that even Matt might condescend from his desires for some type of like AI intelligence nutrient ingestion machine that he wants to subsist on to actually eat that. It sounds incredible. Right, Matt?
It does, yeah.
Summer vegetables and quinoa bowl with fairy tale eggplants, shishito peppers, and corn. Chicken tinga tacos with summer squash and tomato salsa. Excuse me. I want to leave and eat while I read this. Check out this week's menu and get your first 3 meals free with free shipping by going to blueapron.com/majority. You'll love how good it feels and tastes to create incredible home-cooked meals with Blue Apron, so don't wait. That's blueapron.com/majority. Blueapron.com/majority. There is a link on the Majority Report homepage. Blue Apron, a better way to cook. We will be right back with Rafia Zakaria.
Lip up, them a lip up. I'm missing enough of them a flip up. All of them a free run when King Selassie broke his 7 seal and get up. Easy. Look how me dread. Terrible. Wall all your head. Government run under bed. When you see the Rasta coming with the roots and chalice with the chalice and roots. Holding firm to my tradition like a magician. We make the change from the Vatican. Poof, break loose from the minds of the African youth. Even though it may seem like magic, all we do is liberate minds, separate folly from truth. Next time you buy a ticket for Chronics. From me say ease out, everybody start moving, means so much more than a Grammy. For see the youth, them arise spiritually, that prove humanity arise literally. Ascend to dimensions where God is just you. Chalice and roots.
Okay. Chronics in my verse right here. This is a blessing and a curse right here. Blessing to the people with the birthright, but to them dirty capitalists, this are them worst nightmare. Them a lip up. Them get flip up like a pancake, and all them tready get trim up like my landscape. Big up to my listeners, me do this for the fans' sake. The ones when liberal oppose our lyrics could have translate. Pass for applause. New vape and the only floss, me a floss. Roots and chalice, our pass, we a pass. While some a pass out on the grass, we a laugh. Now change the topic. Chronics have a song already about that, so me stop it. The way out of poverty, the artists are flat it. So go tell Lisa and a job and stop it.
Welcome back to the Majority Report. I'm Michael Brooks. Joining us now is Rafia Zakaria. She is a writer and columnist whose work has appeared in The Nation, The Guardian, and she is a columnist for the Dawn newspaper in Pakistan. Rafia, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm post-vacation and realizing that I would like more vacation.
Oh,
but
yeah,
I'm good.
I'm talking to you on the Monday post-vacation.
Yeah.
That's a challenging day.
I save you for special occasions when I'm like I need to. I'm off like crying because I'm no longer lapping a lake. So I'll talk to Rafia about all of the misdeeds of the Western world. So Rafia, you have a piece. I want to get to this piece in The Nation that you have that came out on August 24th. There's a lot of themes in this, and it's called "Can War Reporting Be a Feminist Project?" Now, there's 2 sort of images from pop culture that kind of jumped out to me when I first saw this piece, even before I read it. And one was, a while ago, Katy Perry had this music video. I don't remember for which song. It's my mistake. But essentially it was like, some guy breaks up with her in a bad way, and then she joins the army and becomes like this Marine and is ready to, like, kind of like a killing machine. Almost like the way to get over Russell Brand breaking up with you is to go like kill Afghans as the sort of like ultimate self-esteem sort of rebuilding. We have a new, this Tina Fey movie where she kind of, it's sort of like the madcap version of that, where she goes to Afghanistan and play and as a war reporter. So there's this interesting kind of cultural space of like the war zone as like a place of like American self-discovery almost.
Yes, I mean, you're right. I think one of the corollaries of being at war for now over a decade, almost 15 years, and at war with Afghanistan, Iraq, and the larger Middle East, has been that war is also now in a very, that particular war especially, is, parsed through the mechanisms of popular culture, whether it's Katy Perry videos, whether it's books by journalists, whether it's fiction. And that, of course, is inevitable because, it occupies a place in our politics is inevitably going to be filtered through popular culture. I think the more problematic iteration of that has been that, while we're the left particularly, but, Americans in general might inflect some seriousness when they're talking about war based on, say, a news story or an article in the paper or a policy direction. These iterations of war in popular culture generally receive less scrutiny, but they are nevertheless still very, very important in constructing, either tangibly or intangibly our ideas of who the enemy is, who the other is, and what sorts of ways we can, and how we look at ourselves, because that's essentially a relational act. We define ourselves by what we think other people are. And the moral burden, of course, of wars and of the fact that the U.S. has imposed huge amounts of casualties and sort of infrastructural damage on these countries, perhaps, the moral weight of that is too much. And so you have kind of transformations of that in popular culture. So like, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot with Tina Fey, which is based on Kim Barker's book, is a great example of that because it tries to make light of what is actually a very, very horrific situation. And it does so, it's not just that it cracks jokes, it cracks jokes at the expense of people who generally cannot talk back or provide any level of critical scrutiny to how they are being depicted within that formulation. And I think that last aspect, the fact that we're willing to make fun of or sort of advocate the extermination of people, in popular culture, and that we don't really pause to consider the moral implications of that is what is problematic, I think, for me.
Mm-hmm. So let's get then to the specifics of the books you're talking about. And it seems like I always like making these distinctions with you and in general, but because I think they're very important. That, again, there's sort of, in this landscape, there's the colonial history, the colonial dimensions of American foreign policy. There's the civilian casualties. There's, our just sort of global social engineering. Then there's, legitimate and I think, real threats. They may be exaggerated. They might be very misunderstood, but there is terrorism. There are human rights abuses. Those are real things. And then there's this really problematic territory, which you explore a lot, of human rights, because it's not a question of minimizing some of these issues, but it's definitely the way that they are just sort of constantly deployed in the service of either sort of I guess very practically, really wrong and disastrous in many cases policies, but then also to just sort of reinforce narratives that let us off the hook, as you were saying before, kind of defining ourselves in relation. And specifically, you focus on this notion of war reporting as a feminist project because you talk about access to women's spaces in pretty patriarchal places like Pakistan, as an example, or Afghanistan, that can be accessed by women reporters from the West, but then that process of sort of trust and opening is not necessarily reciprocated in the reporting.
Yeah, I mean, the nation piece takes this on. And, you know, at the outset, I have to say, because I do sometimes see these sorts of critiques that I write reduced to, well, you think white women just shouldn't go out there and tell these stories. That's actually not what I'm saying at all. What I am trying to point out is how, you know, we have these sorts of different strains of empowerment in our culture, in American culture. And then you have different strains of, and in a sense, those strains of empowerment often define what is universally considered feminist, right? So a journalist, a female journalist particularly, who's going into a war zone to report is considered brave, and that's considered, you know, a step ahead for women. And I'm not contesting that. I'm not contesting the fact that it is very brave, no matter what color you are, to go and try to tell these stories at the risk of personal danger to yourself. The part that I found problematic is what I would call like this kind of sleight of hand, where the reporting is being sold or presented within this framework of look at this brave woman, female reporter. And the consequence of that framework is that it is the female reporter who's going into these intimate spaces that becomes the story. So all the time you're aware of the fact that this story has come to you via this female reporter who is white and who has put herself in grave danger. So there's this juxtaposition then between the Afghan woman sitting in a shelter or can't leave her house, or, you know, just every kind of trope of submission and subjugation. That is real. I'm not denying that either. Right. But what it does is put things within that context. So brave white woman journalist and versus subjugated, faceless Afghan woman. And that, I think, is a problematic juxtaposition because it doesn't present it claims to, but doesn't actually present any particular truths about the lives of those women, first of all. Second of all, it kind of fudges what I call these two warring feminisms, which is, on one hand, you have the feminism of a shared sisterhood, empathy and understanding the issues and problems of other women. And then there is another feminism, the lean-in sort of feminism of career advancement. Mm-hmm. And in that story of a white female journalist going into Afghanistan, for example, those two concepts are fudged. So when they're trying to get the access, it's very much a feminism of sisterhood, right? Because I'm a woman, I'm going to go in this space and I'm going to get this story. And
Rafia, could you just pause one moment and just spell out, when we talk about going into these spaces that are sort of more zones of femininity in a place like Afghanistan, can we, I want you to finish your point, but can you specify what those zones are and what that kind of entails practically and on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, I start the article with this, and I think your listeners and readers will be familiar. I mean, in much of the Middle East, in Afghanistan, and to a certain extent also in, in Pakistan and other Muslim countries, Pakistan, I would say, is only a partially gender segregated society, but in general, women's spaces are separate. I grew up in a house. I mean, this doesn't mean that women never see men or that, they're sort of imprisoned in these spaces. What it simply means is that, there are spaces probably within any home in those regions where you sit around with sisters and aunts and cousins, and there's a greater degree of intimacy and a kind of letting your guard down, because you're just around other women, and being in those female spaces is there are a set of sort of expectations and understanding that go with those spaces. So they might not always be explicit, but if you spend time in any of these cultures, they are, you would understand that these are spaces where, there's a certain expectation or understanding of closeness, and it's not a professional environment as such. It's a place where you're relaxing, and so you're not gonna be particularly maybe self-conscious or conscious about every word you say.
Right. And then the notion would be that this is a place where obviously you can potentially access a different, disclosure about how a place operates. So back to the larger point you were making, which was that when there's this sort of dual track of a kind of careerism versus solidarity, if I could shorthand it, if that's okay. And then that you can kind of use the solidarity to maybe get access to a place that, as an example, just practically a male journalist sort of can't. They're not going to be invited to kind of like hang out and have tea in one of those rooms for a variety of reasons. So there can be this sort of, okay, I want to hear your narrative. I want to hear your perspective. I want you to embody the situation in your own particular way. But then, are you saying that, practically as a career level, that might be one of the sort of few advantages, and you pointed this out, and it's been pointed out by others, that women journalists have, which is like, well, I can actually sort of access this situation that maybe my male counterparts can't in a place like Afghanistan. And then the third part is how it's filtered back to a Western audience, which you say in this piece and reviewing some of these authors, which you can get to, that it isn't the upshot is not necessarily political social solidarity and exposure. It's kind of like a certain maybe voyeurism that again reasserts the kind of personal qualities of the Western reporter doing the reporting.
Absolutely. I think the point that I'm making is that while they may use this sort of implicit understanding of sisterhood to get in and get the story, it is still a very Western, white, and I would even argue male framing that the story comes out in. So, for instance, the example, and I think that there's this sort of feminist empowerment motif that goes in getting the story. But the part that I'm upset about is that, okay, so, for instance, if you're at times photographer and you go in and you get this story, I don't think that there's a lot of questioning among these journalists on whether the story they're telling is a story that essentially still fits into the same exotic Orient, submissive Muslim woman paradigm, which I would argue is actually a very patriarchal paradigm that they themselves have fought against, in the West as part of the feminist movement. And so I'll give you, one of the examples, for instance, I talk about in the article is one journalist, and she's going out and she's very much looking to break into the New York Times and play some pieces there. And she goes and interviews this mother and daughter that operate, and this is before the Syria. Before Syria was at war. She goes to Syria and she interviews these women that run a female-only madrasa or religious school. And, she kind of finds out what they're all about, and she gets all this material. But, it's in a sense not very sexy because there's no sort of, it's just women running this religious school. So she puts the quotes in the story about this woman and her mother and their religious school with a parallel narrative about the Qubaisite, or a secret Quranic sisterhood that she has also heard about in Syria. She has nothing other than her hunch, there's really nothing connecting those two. But she puts both of them next to each other in that story because, a secret sisterhood is sexier than just, women running a religious school. And then what happens is that after the story is published, she speaks to the daughter, and the daughter is, there's a tension there because, this association is problematic. And then the journalist admits herself that putting those two things together may actually endanger both the religious school and the women that she interviewed over there, because, the Syrian secret police, thinks, okay, that they really might be associated with this secret sisterhood. So that's an illustrative case, right? Because you use this kind of sisterhood, this kind of, I really care about your story, but then when you're selling your story, and it is true that women still face, even in the West, a largely male editorial, leadership. Right. There isn't any pushback at that end to say, I want you to just publish this story and not, and I'm not going to sort of tinker with it and make it what people,
or sex
have
it
read
up.
over
I mean, to
like
use
sex
that
it up,
old like Iraq thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually literal because one of the stories the same journalist wrote is, about the most promiscuous virgins in the world.
Yes.
And then that's a story about, Lebanese women. So, yes.
And an amazing
exactly
quote from that article, though, that you pulled is that and that's sort of like, and again, I think that's, at least in that case, it isn't, I guess, a speculative, but she's exploring the kind of marriage market and those dynamics in Lebanon, which is a, legitimate thing to write about, explore. But one of the young women that she's speaking to says to her at one point, like, why are you so worried about us? Why don't you go talk to I forget the phrase, like the serious woman or something, like the women that are, she used some phrase like that, who are working on education, employment, human rights. Like, we're just trying to kind of like, do our nails and get married. And that's like, fine, that's our thing. But why are you so interested in that? There's a lot more kind of activity taking place in Lebanon than we're involved with. I mean, it was kind of fascinating.
Yes. I mean, I think, when I read that, I got goosebumps.
Yeah.
Because it just shows, look, it is a reality that there are vast, and this is not something exclusive just to, white women writing about Muslim women, but there often is a very, and you as a journalist know this, power differential between the person who is going to tell the story and the subjects of the story. And, that is not something that can be wished away. And that is also actually a reason why telling stories is important, because of that huge gap in power. But it becomes a separate issue when we're not willing to look at how we can mediate that difference in a way that is not just ethical, but also, that also reflects these other concerns. So, the trick here is that, okay, journalism involves trying to get the story, and often a lot of journalists sort of feign some kind of, quote, friendship with people to try to understand what they're all about, and that's not at all exclusive to this context. But there's a difference between, the story that you would get in that, within that dynamic, and sort of understanding that in these cases, the story is sold as a kind of example of feminist achievement. So when Alyssa Rubin or any of the other women, Lindsay Dario, talk about going into these environments, they're very much considered sort of heroines in Western feminism because they're doing that. So, you can't have that both ways. You can't sort of use, this I'm your buddy and I'll get do that. And then say, okay, well, I'm a journalist, so I don't have allegiances to anybody. So I'm just going to tell this story however I want to tell it, because that's what journalists do. And that is the thing that I'm talking about, is this sort of very strategic feminism that is employed by photographers and, white women journalists, where they're sort of being very strategic in how they're presenting themselves based on the context, and then getting tremendous dividends from what they get, owing to that sort of opportunism. So, the book talks about, the article talks about Muslim women, but, the latest photograph, for example, Lindsay Dario had on the cover of Time, so had a South Sudanese teenager who is virtually naked and pregnant. And, and when that cover of Time came out, I tweeted it with the cover of Time from an issue that talked about campus rape in the United States. Now, that issue just has, essentially a drawing as the cover. So you see, again, that, the kind of voyeurism that's considered okay when you're talking about South Sudanese women or Afghan women or Iraqi women is not considered okay when you're talking about American women who are survivors of campus rape.
And before we... Oh, sorry. Finish your thought. I just had another.
No, that's it.
Before we're going to pivot in just a moment, because I do want to get on this other train with you for just a couple of minutes on the sort of exposure culture. But I guess the final theme that I want to hit with you on this, because I think we hit it a lot, and this is really important, is the policy implications and the broader kind of understanding of this region. The other reason that this is a major problem is that, again, we seem to sort of dual track these conversations, that there's sort of like either, on one hand, actually, and I think it's a little bit more emerging voice in the United States to some degree, which is like, let's, don't engage and don't worry about it because that's just the way those people are, sort of like, attitude essentially. And the policy might be right of non-engagement, but the attitude is a problem. And then there's this sort of notion that, going back, really to the, engagement in Afghanistan under Bush, that, even then, even though that was sort of like positioned on these very narrow national security grounds, but, Laura Bush kind of spoke about Afghan women, that these sort of issues have always been used as an umbrella in the sort of broader policy set. And not only is that questionable in and of itself, it undermines, as an example, we've talked about if there's, indigenous feminist human rights movements in Pakistan who are dealing with religious fanatics, dealing with a corrupt and unresponsive government in many cases, and then their mission and their purpose is associated from a brand perspective with a reckless drone program, as an example. That harms and undermines the innate and indigenous work that is taking place in very difficult circumstances in all of these countries.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think...
Okay, Rafia, go back to what you were saying.
Yeah, I was just talking about how these overtures, they impose a cost on the societies and on the women that we're talking about here after the story from the Western perspective is over. But more than that, I think they also expose how even, in this sort of post-colonial moment where many, many people are very open and eager to disavow the metaphors of colonialism, we're not critical enough of the ways in which we tell these stories. So, I think that that is the crux of this issue, is that we're still telling the story with the white Westerner at the center of it. And, that ultimately is what, and in terms of what you said about over there, I think the compartmentalization of the women over there or the problems there, that, and it kind of leads into the Guardian piece on self-exposure, because it's when you read those stories, you see, okay, well, these are the concerns that matter, that really matter to Western women, okay? It's not necessarily, Afghan women or Iraqi women. Like you said,
let's get to that. Let's get to that, because you did have this piece that came out a little while ago, and we were actually going to talk about it when it came out, but we couldn't sort of figure it out together time-wise. But basically, you, and I want to be really clear that, this piece wasn't written because you have a problem with sort of, humor or sex memoirs or anything like that, but you sort of attack this certain sort of culture of, you call it the vogue of self-respect, the title is The Vogue for Self-Exposure Has Reduced Feminism to Naked Navel Gazing. And it is an interesting contrast in light of these sort of crisis questions we're talking about. And you sort of go over Lena Dunham and a couple of other sort of books in that genre. Can you explain what you mean by that? I know that there are already people who I'm sure who are already sort of pre-offended just on title.
Well, the first thing that I think it's necessary, and this piece it's about these tell-all memoirs, and Amy Schumer's is out now, Lena Dunham's was out a while ago, and several others, and it kind of talks about how this very, very raw depiction of women's sexual lives that is implicated in a lot of these books. Now, at the outset, and I say this in the article as well, it's difficult to talk about this issue because as it is, women's stories are often compartmentalized as women's stories. Women authors are compartmentalized. And in general, there's a dearth of, these sorts of subjective perspectives from women. And that dearth, that's been recognized over decades by many, many feminists, means that, until you have those stories in the public sphere, you don't have, you generally don't have an idea of how the world looks from a female perspective. So, it's very important to acknowledge that, and I try really hard to do that in the piece. At the same time, there is kind of the imperative of the market, or what kinds of stories about women sell, and hence create, if not an explicit, then a de facto standard of, what kind of book you can write if you're a woman who wants to write a memoir. And that's the part that troubles me, because, what we have in these stories is just kind of like this vomiting of everything about my life, from like how dirty my underwear is to, how I like to fart or whatever. And these are these are examples from the books that I cite in that article. And that bothers me for the simple reason that, a platform or the ability to speak and have your thoughts out there is something that has to be taken very seriously. And that's one of the things, that I talk about, is that this sort of abandonment of dignity, this abandonment of seriousness, because, and I question, so to what extent are these stories fulfilling the larger feminist I would say, purpose of having women's stories out there versus merely sort of, appealing to a much more base kind of titillation and voyeuristic curiosity that other people may have about women, or particularly young women.
Well, can I ask you then, Rafia, is the problem then that, because, I think what you said before is obviously the case. There's a market, the market dictates, certainly in an American context, the market dictates pretty much everything. And you're talking, about people, I mean, everybody can have their sort of different subjective opinions. I sort of I think Amy Schumer's pretty funny. Lena Dunham's appeal has sort of remained a mystery to me. But is it the question then that not so much though that these books are coming out and you can sort of, you can like them or not like them, find them, this or that, whatever, that's fine. But the fact that there's a larger narrative fit around them. Like there's a projection of meaning into these books and products, that there's something really weighty going on, when in reality it's like, no, it's just, it's sort of, all the things that you've sort of described it at, which titillating, whatever, which isn't a problem per se, but let's not pretend that it's something greater than it is. Is that the sort of problem?
Right, because I think what a lot of these books represent is kind of the use of feminism or women's empowerment as a marketing tool. So, it's like the fun and flirty feminism is what I call it, as opposed to the more serious feminism. And in a sense, it disconnects with what I'm talking about in the Nation article about Afghanistan and Iraq. At the center of it is this idea that anytime you're talking about women, sex should be somewhere near there. Because who wants to read a serious book about women and, empowerment? And so if you put sex in there, that's going to sell more. And of course, women should kind of be wanting to talk about sex anyway, because that's really the definition of empowerment, is women having a lot of sex. I mean, that's what Amy Schumer, at least, seems to imply. And not that there is a problem for women who choose to do that, but the fact is that the repeated use of that pairing, that anytime you talk about women, you somehow have to implicate this kind of titillating attitude or titillating aspect, or be talking about sex. I really worry. There's actually a huge volume of these sorts of books out, and I list them. Is that we women and feminists particularly are not really being critical enough about how sex is being employed in that equation. So it's kind of been sold to women now that women's lives, and particularly women have sex, and that's something that should be accepted, and I completely agree with that. But then there is this other move that says that that's all that women really should be talking about if they want a best-selling book or want a wildly successful Hollywood career, because that is something that second-wave feminists, who are out of vogue now, did talk about. This sort of kind of like, if you can't play the coquette, you're not really wanted around here. And so I worry that this new iteration, even if it uses language that is different, so Lena Dunham or Amy Schumer, are talking about it in a way that's very, that puts in this idea that women are themselves making these decisions, and that's totally fine. But it's, again, a very male model. So, Amy Schumer is acting like in a lot of ways, she sees this, being very open about her sexual life as something that is empowering. Now, it definitely can be empowering to a woman. I don't contest that into her. But the fact is it empowering for all women? And should it be the standard by which we, by which we consider whose stories are told.
So you're contesting. You're saying just to clear, it's not that it can't be. It certainly can be, but it isn't innately empowering.
Well, I don't think it's prescriptively empowering, right? So I don't think that is something that all women, and I think that they would actually agree with that.
Yeah.
They would say that, but you have to add to that the sort of the existing realities of the publishing world, which the last I think WIDA survey was is largely dominated by white women. So, what you're saying to women who may not be white or who may not agree is that, that's fine if you don't agree, but by and large, those voices are not going to be sold at bookstores at the airport. It is going to be Lena Dunham. It is going to be Amy Schumer. And so there is this kind of eminence that's given particular narratives versus others that may be also boring because they're not, funny enough. So,
So we dare to be boring.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Do we dare to be boring?
Do we dare to be boring? Rafia Zakaria, I don't find you boring, in spite of my sort of lack of knowledge about any gastrointestinal ailments you've had in your life. So it still works regardless. I always appreciate talking with you. There'll be links to the articles on the Majority Report website, majority.fm. Rafia Zakaria, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, everyone. We are going to go to the fun half, where we will take your calls at 646-257-3920. 646-257-3920. The IMs are open, and we have a lot of stories, a lot of sound to get to. So become a member of the Majority Report today. Majority.fm/become a member. Fair trade. JustCoffee.coop, fair trade, coffee, tea, or chocolate. It's a great way of supporting the Majority Report. If you're using an online service like Amazon or Jet, go to Majority Report Kickback, use our link. It helps a lot. Give the Majority Report a review on iTunes if you can. If you're not already on to Dope Boys, hope you are. Check us out. We have a brand new show dropping tomorrow on the future of medical innovation and inequality. And several other topics we covered, including, of course, the brand F-Up of the week. See you all in the fun half. Jesus, Matt.